In a surprising and deeply emotional moment, veteran actor Harrison Ford struggled to keep his composure during a live call from President Ibrahim Traoré. Known for his steady voice and non-nonsense presence, Ford's voice cracked as he whispered, "You got me, man." This video captures the exact moment vulnerability broke through, a raw, powerful connection between two respected figures that left everyone watching in stunned silence. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in Los Angeles. Harrison Ford sat alone in his study, the California sunlight spilling across the wooden desk. Scattered with old movie scripts and photographs from decades past, he was reviewing lines for a charity event speech when his assistant rushed in, phone in hand, eyes wide. "Mr. Ford, it's President Ibrahim Traoré. Live." Harrison frowned. He'd never spoken to Traoré personally, only read about him in news articles, describing his courage and fierce love for his people. "Put him through," Harrison said, his deep voice calm, though curiosity stirred inside him. The line clicked, and then came a warm, steady voice. "Mr. Ford, I know we've never met, but I've been wanting to tell you something important." Harrison leaned back in his chair, puzzled. "I'm listening," Traoré continued, speaking not about politics or fame. He told a short, deeply personal story, one that connected his own struggles in Burkina Faso with the decision Harrison had made decades ago that, unknown to him, had changed lives. And then came a pause. Harrison felt his throat tighten. This wasn't just a call. It was something else, something deeper. The president's words came slowly, each one heavy with meaning. Harrison listened in stillness, hearing not just the voice of a leader, but the soul of a man who carried his nation's pain and hope. "Years ago," Traoré said softly, "a film you made was shown in a small village here. It was the first time those children believed a hero could stand for what is right, even when the world is against him." Harrison felt his chest tighten. He had made dozens of films, but he had never imagined they could ripple so far. Traoré continued, "That moment gave birth to dreams here. Some of those children grew up to become doctors, teachers, even soldiers who now protect our borders. And I wanted you to know your work mattered." Harrison opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence between them felt sacred. His eyes drifted to an old photograph on his desk, him on set, laughing with a child actor. He didn't know it, but in this moment, millions would later watch this call replayed online. For decades, Harrison Ford had been known for his composure. The press had called him unshakable. But as Traoré spoke, something broke inside him. The president's voice had shifted lower, softer. "Mr. Ford, this is not about politics. It's about gratitude. You've touched lives you will never meet. You've given hope where there was none. And from one man to another, thank you." Harrison swallowed hard, but the lump in his throat wouldn't go away. His hand gripped the arm of his chair. He had faced danger in films, flown real airplanes, stood on massive stages. But this was different. "You got me, man," Harrison finally whispered, his voice trembling. There was silence on the line, not the awkward kind. This was the kind that holds 1,000 emotions. And somewhere deep in his chest, Harrison felt something he hadn't in years. The sting of tears he couldn't hide. This call was just beginning, but it would change the course of the week and his heart forever. Harrison sat frozen in his chair, the phone warm against his ear. His assistant, still standing in the doorway, could sense something different. She didn't move, afraid the smallest sound might break the moment. On the other end, Traoré spoke slowly, his words painting vivid images. "In my childhood," he said, "there were days when the only light we had was a flickering screen run by an old generator. That light showed me worlds far from mine, worlds where justice was worth fighting for. You were often the one holding that light." Harrison's breathing grew heavier. This wasn't small talk. It was a deep cut into his soul. Traoré's voice carried a weight of sincerity. "When I became a soldier, then later a leader, I remembered those heroes who stood firm in your films, and I wanted to be that for my people." In that quiet study in Los Angeles, miles away from Burkina Faso, Harrison felt something unusual, like a thread connecting them across continents. And then, for the first time, his eyes began to blur. Traoré paused almost as if he could sense Harrison's silence. "Mr. Ford, do you remember a charity trip you made to Africa more than 25 years ago?" Harrison blinked. He did it, had been quick, unpublicized, a dusty airstrip, a handful of volunteers, and a school where he spent an afternoon handing out books. He had never spoken about it in interviews. He hadn't thought anyone remembered. "I was there," Traoré said softly. "I was a boy in that school. You signed my notebook and told me your story matters. Never forget that." Harrison's mouth went dry. He had said it casually back then, the way people do when they meet children. But for Traoré, it had stayed. That day, Traoré continued, "I decided I would live for something bigger than myself." Harrison's grip tightened on the phone. He had just realized this wasn't a random call. This was fate circling back after a quarter of a century. The study felt smaller now, air-heavy with unspoken emotions. Harrison tried to speak, but his voice faltered. "Mr. President, I didn't know," he managed to say. Traoré's reply came with quiet strength. "You didn't have to know, you just had to care. That one moment shaped my path. And today, I wanted you to hear it from me. Not as a politician, but as that boy you once encouraged." The room seemed to hum with silence. Harrison's assistant turned away, pretending to busy herself, but she too was wiping at her eyes, and then it happened. Harrison's voice cracked barely above a whisper. "You got me, man." It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't for cameras. It was raw. Unfiltered humanity. Traoré didn't rush to speak. He let the words hang there, powerful and unshaken. In that moment, the whole call shifted from an unexpected conversation to something neither of them would ever forget. The call had grown deeper, more personal than Harrison could have imagined, yet neither man seemed in a rush to end it. The study window, the California sun, had begun to sink, but Harrison barely noticed. Traoré's voice came again, softer now. "I'm not calling for recognition. I'm calling because sometimes the people who inspire us never know they did." Harrison pressed his palm to his forehead. He had met presidents before, spoken to heads of state, but this was no political exchange. This was a man reaching across thousands of miles to say thank you. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked loudly, marking each second of the silence that followed. When Harrison finally spoke, his tone carried the weight of a lifetime. "Mr. President, you have no idea what your words mean to me, and yet, deep down," Harrison sensed there was something more, something Traoré hadn't said yet. "I told you I was that boy in the school," Traoré began slowly. "But there's something I didn't tell you." Harrison's breath caught. The president's voice shifted, measured, but charged with emotion. "That day you came, I was ready to give up on school. My father had died. My mother was struggling. I thought education was a luxury I couldn't afford. But you looked at me, and for the first time someone saw me as more than a poor boy from a small village." Harrison could hear a faint tremor in Traoré's words, like someone holding back a memory that still hurt. "I kept that notebook you signed. I kept your words. There was no acting here, only truth, raw and unshaped." It had been just a phone call, but within hours, the news leaked. Someone close to the president had shared that he was on a live call with Harrison Ford. By the next morning, reporters were camped outside Harrison's driveway. Headlines swirled. Harrison Ford, an emotional call with African leader, what made the legendary actor's voice break. But inside the study, Harrison's focus was elsewhere. He couldn't stop replaying the president's words. They had sent a short video greeting, waving handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Harrison." Harrison's eyes welled instantly. He had faced cameras his entire life, but now, with no one watching, the tears fell freely. He realized something profound. This week had only begun, and it was already changing him in ways he didn't expect. 2 days had passed since their first conversation, but Harrison couldn't shake it from his mind. Every word from Traoré echoed in his thoughts. He had been invited to many high-profile events in his life, yet nothing felt as important as that call. Late that evening, his phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a planned conversation. It was a direct line from Ouagadougou. Harrison Traoré's voice came warm but urgent. "I have something I'd like you to hear." Before Harrison could respond, the sound shifted. Children's voices began singing in the background. It was a song in the Moray language, their words gentle but full of gratitude. "They wanted to thank you themselves," Traoré explained. Harrison closed his eyes. The music wasn't polished. It wasn't perfect, but it was pure. "They don't just see you as a film star." Harrison couldn't speak. He simply let the tears fall. The next morning, Harrison's assistant knocked softly on the study door. "Mr. Ford, President Traoré has sent you something." On the desk lay a sealed envelope with Burkina Faso's crest. Inside was a handwritten letter, careful script, in dark blue ink. "Harrison, you changed the course of my life once. I'd like to give you the chance to change it again." He had work commitments, public appearances, but as he read the letter again, none of that mattered. In the corner of the envelope was a photographed tray as a boy holding that same notebook Harrison had signed decades earlier. It wasn't a request, it was a call to something bigger. That night, Harrison sat alone in his living room, the letter. On the coffee table in front of him, his mind wrestled with logistics, press attention, tight schedules, security concerns. But beneath it all was something simpler, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Purpose. He thought about the boy Traoré had been, about the children singing in that call, and about the way his own life had been shaped by people who believed in him. Finally, Harrison reached for his phone. The number 2, the president's office, was already saved. When Traoré answered, Harrison didn't bother with small talk. "I'm coming," he said firmly. There was a pause, and then the president's voice brightened. "Then let's make this week unforgettable. Warm, heavy, alive." As Harrison stepped off the plane, he was greeted not by cameras, but by the soft hum of voices and the smell of earth after a light rain. President Ibrahim Traoré stood waiting at the edge of the tarmac, not in a stiff suit, but in a simple, traditional shirt. The moment their eyes met, there was no handshake protocol. Traoré embraced him like a long-lost brother. "I had to," Harrison replied, his voice lower than usual, as if the place itself demanded reverence. They drove through narrow streets, lined with small shops and bright fabrics. Children waved as the convoy passed. Harrison noticed every face, some smiling, some curious, all alive with energy. He realized then that this trip wasn't about him. It was about something far bigger. The next morning, Traoré took Harrison to a rural village to hours outside the city. The roads turned to dirt, the landscape opening into fields where farmers worked under the sun. When they arrived, a crowd was waiting. Women in colorful dresses clapped and sang. Children darted between legs, their laughter mixing with the sound of drums. Traoré leaned over and said quietly, "This is the place I grew up." An elder stepped forward, holding a worn notebook. It was the notebook, the one Harrison had signed decades ago. The elder handed it to Harrison, who turned the pages slowly, his own handwriting still clear after all these years. The sight was almost too much. He closed the notebook gently, holding it to his chest. Traoré's voice broke the moment's stillness. "This village never forgot you." That afternoon, Harrison and Traoré sat beneath the shade of a large baobab tree. While villagers gathered in a circle, one by one, people stood to share their stories. A young teacher spoke about how she had once seen Harrison in a movie at a traveling cinema and decided she wanted to be a hero for children in real life. A farmer described how his son, inspired by Traoré's leadership, had joined the National Guard to protect their land. Harrison listened intently, each story weaving into the next like threads in a tapestry. He wasn't just hearing about lives, he was seeing how moments, words, and courage could ripple through time. When it was his turn to speak, Harrison's voice wavered. "I came here thinking I was visiting, but I realize now I've come home to something I didn't know I'd lost." The crowd fell silent, but the emotion in their eyes said everything. That evening, after the village celebrations, Harrison sat alone outside his small guest house. The air was warm, the stars brighter than he had seen in years. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat echoed softly as if the land itself had a heartbeat. "President." They sat side by side, not speaking for a long while. "Why small acts matter." Harrison nodded. "I came here thinking I might give something back, but what I've received, it's more than I can hold." Traoré smiled faintly. "You gave a boy hope once. That boy became a man who tries to give hope to a nation. Now together, maybe we can light the path for others." On his last day in Burkina Faso, the village gathered again. This time they presented Harrison with a gift, a hand-carved wooden sculpture of 2 hands clasped together, one larger, one smaller. The elder explained. "This is to remind you that when one hand lifts another, both are strengthened." Harrison's throat tightened as he accepted it. He turned to Traoré and said, "I'll keep this where I see it every day." The crowd began to sing again, the same song. He was in the middle of it, surrounded by faces that had become part of him in just a few days. Before leaving, Harrison knelt to speak to the children. "Your stories matter. You matter. Don't ever forget that." When Harrison's plane landed back in Los Angeles, the world already knew about his trip. Photos, videos, and clips of the village. Singing had gone viral. In a follow-up live call, Traoré appeared on screen. "Harrison," he said, "the door to Burkina Faso will always be open to you." Harrison's voice cracked once again. "You got me, man, forever." The screen went silent, but millions watching felt the weight of that moment. It wasn't about fame. And now to everyone watching this, if this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button, subscribe, and most importantly, drop a comment telling us the moment in your life when someone believed in you. Your words might just be the spark for someone else's hope. Let's keep this chain of light